The road was sweltering with heat. The air conditioner was barely keeping up with the August heat as we drove down the highway toward Richmond. I sat in the back, my cheek pressed against the warm glass, watching the monotonous scenery flicker by. My name is Eunice Huffington. I'm 67, and I'm going to the funeral of my best friend, Vivian Prescott. Vivian was the only person I could be real with. We met in college 50 years ago, and even though life scattered us to different cities, we never lost touch. Unlike my family, Vivian always heard me. Really heard me. Mom, can you keep it down? My son Brandon said irritably, still on the phone. What are you babbling about? I didn't realize I was thinking out loud about Vivian. It was a typical reaction I'd long since gotten used to. I'm sorry, darling, I replied, and pressed myself tighter against the window. Brandon, 46 years old, sat behind the wheel. He was young, with his first gray hair, which he was carefully covering. His wife, Agnes, sat in the front seat, tucked into a clipboard. 42 years old, always immaculate, always haughty. Next to me sat my granddaughter Talia, 23, always staring at her phone, occasionally sending me condescending smiles. My sister Myrna had decided to take an airplane, so she wouldn't be bumping around in the car. She's 70, but she looks younger. She gets regular facelifts and colors her hair. Myrna always liked to emphasize that she lived better than me. I'm hungry, Agnes said, closing the clipboard. Brandon, when do we stop for a bite to eat? There's a roadside cafe in 15 minutes, he answered. Mom, do you have cash on you? My card didn't work in a place like this last time. I sighed. Of course, my money. It always is. I was paying for everything. This trip, gas, future hotel rooms. But it wasn't about the money. I'd long ago gotten used to being the family ATM. It's about attitude. Yeah, there's a little bit, I replied quietly, though a little bit was an understatement. I always took enough cash with me, knowing that without it, traveling with my family would turn into endless recriminations. Grandma, Talia turned to me. Is it true that you and what's her name? Vivian? Is it true that you've been friends all your lives? I was touched that my granddaughter was interested, even if she couldn't remember the name of the woman I'd called my best friend for the past 50 years. Yes, honey. I met her in college in 1996. Vivian was an art major and I was an accounting major. Accounting? Talia grimaced. God, Grandma, what a bore. Brandon chuckled, clearly agreeing with his daughter. What else could you do? Agnes intervened. In your day, women either became teachers or accountants. Actually, I tried to explain, we had a choice. Vivian, for example. Oh God, it's Vivian again. Brandon rolled his eyes. Mom, could you at least on this trip not turn every conversation into a story about your miracle friend? I stopped talking. Vivian really was amazing. Bright, talented, brave. She'd opened her art gallery in the 80s, when women entrepreneurs had it doubly hard. She traveled the world, loved life, was able to enjoy the little things and never let anyone trample on her dignity. I chose a different path. Family. I thought that I was creating a reliable home, a warm hearth, where I would always want to return. I put my heart and soul into my husband and son, and then when my husband died, I kept giving myself to Brandon and his wife and daughter. And what did I get in return? Annoyed looks and having to ask permission to tell her own life story. When we stopped at the cafe, I paid for lunch for everyone 4 burgers, fries, milkshakes for Talia and Agnes, beer for Brandon. All I got myself was coffee and I lost my appetite. This trip was your idea, Agnes reminded her, taking a bite out of her burger. You could have flown alone, saved time. I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to be together, I answered, stirring the sugar in my coffee. We so rarely get to see each other. Mom, we live 20 minutes away from you, Brandon snorted. It's just that everyone has their own things to do. Things they couldn't visit me for months, but they'd show up whenever they needed money. Speaking of business, Agnes turned to her son, don't forget to call the realtor when we get to the hotel. I want to know what's going on with those apartments in Florida. What apartments? I asked. Brandon and Agnes exchanged glances. We're just looking at investment options, Brandon said quickly. Nothing serious. But I knew my son too well. They were hiding something. Maybe they were planning a move? But then why hide it? Back in the car, Brandon turned on the music, loud, aggressive. Conversation became impossible, which was probably the goal. I rested my head back on the headrest and closed my eyes, remembering Vivian. Eunice, she'd said to me in our last phone conversation a month ago, they're sucking the life out of you. You don't deserve it. Her voice was weak, haggard with illness, but determined as always. Promise me you'll start living for yourself. I promised, not knowing she would be gone in a week. And now I was on my way to the funeral, still living by someone else's rules. 3 hours later, Richmond showed up. I'd booked rooms at the old Jefferson Hotel, an elegant Victorian-style building. Vivian would appreciate it. She'd always admired my taste, unlike my family. Why do you have to be so pompous? Brandon grinned as we pulled up in front of the hotel with the livery doormen. We could have gone for something simpler and saved money. It's your mother. Agnes grinned as we got out of the car. She loves to show off. I didn't say anything. Vivian loved this hotel. She and I had once spent a weekend here in the 80s, when her gallery was just starting to make a success. We drank champagne, talked about life, laughed until we cried. Happiest weekend of my life. In the lobby, Brandon quickly made his way to the front desk. Reservation under the name Huffington, he said, as if he'd paid for the rooms himself. The receptionist, a young woman with a fern name tag, smiled. Yes, we have a reservation from Eunice Huffington. 2 suites and 1 standard room for 3 nights, all paid for in advance. 2 suites? Agnes raised an eyebrow. Who's the second one for? For Myrna, I explained. She's flying in tomorrow morning. Of course, Agnes rolled her eyes. Your precious sister needs a suite. We can switch, I shrugged. I don't care. No, Agnes cut me off. We're adults and we deserve normal conditions. I sighed. We took the keys and went up to our rooms. The suite for Brandon, Agnes, and Talia was large, with 2 bedrooms and a living room. My standard room was small but cozy. I need to rest before dinner, I said as we unpacked. Speaking of dinner, Brendan glanced at his watch. We made reservations at Lemaire's for 7 tonight. They say it's the best restaurant in town. Lemaire's? I was surprised. You have to book a month in advance. Agnes has connections, Brandon smiled smugly. Her cousin knows someone in management. I nodded, not mentioning that Vivian had invited me there many times, but I'd always declined. Too expensive. I have a family around my neck, I replied. And now that same family would go to the restaurant of my dreams without any remorse. Back in the room, I laid down on the bed, going over our entire trip in my mind. I'd hoped so much that this trip would bring us closer together, that we'd finally become a real family. A stupid, naive dream. The longer I thought about it, the more I realized Vivian was right. I'd spent too long living for others, forgetting about myself. There was a knock at the door. It was Talia. Grandma, we're going to dinner. Are you coming? Of course, sweetheart. I stood up, smoothing my crumpled blouse. Give me 5 minutes. When I stepped out into the hallway, Brandon and Agnes were already there, dressed to the nines. Mom, Brandon looked at my simple blouse and pants. Are you seriously going to wear that? Lemaire's is haute cuisine. There's a dress code. I didn't bring any evening clothes, I replied. We're here for the funeral. Agnes and Brandon looked at each other. Maybe you should have dinner at the hotel, Agnes suggested with fake concern. You must be tired from the road. I realized they were trying to leave me behind. No, I want to come with you, I insisted. It didn't matter what I was wearing. Mom, Brandon said as if he were explaining the obvious to a child. You're going to embarrass us. And besides, you're not going to like the food there, with all the foie gras and tartare. You've never even had sushi. I'm paying for this dinner, I reminded her quietly. Exactly, Agnes said. So why waste money on dishes you won't appreciate? Better get some rest, get ready for the funeral tomorrow. I stood in the hallway looking at my son and his family, all dressed up, ready to have fun on my money. And suddenly I realized with piercing clarity that I was just a wallet to them. Not a mother, not a grandmother, not a person with feelings and desires. Just a convenient ATM machine. Okay, I gave up. Have a good night. They left without noticing the tears in my eyes. I went back to the room and sat on the bed, feeling empty and alone. The cell phone, which I rarely used, vibrated. A message from Talia. I'm sorry, Grandma. I'll try to bring you dessert. A small glimmer of kindness, but even it couldn't make up for the pain of knowing my own family had abandoned me in the hotel lobby, knowing I'd paid for all the rooms, for their entire vacation. I wiped away my tears and decided to have dinner after all. The hotel restaurant was not crowded. I sat down at a table in the corner and ordered a salad and a glass of white wine. Enjoy your meal, Mrs. Huffington, the waitress smiled. I flinched, surprised that she knew my name. Then I remembered this was a hotel. They always knew the names of the guests. As I stared at my reflection in the window pane, I thought about how I had become invisible in my own family. When exactly did this happen? After my husband died, or even before? Or maybe I'd always been just a means to an end for them. Promise me you'll start living for yourself. Vivian's voice sounded in my head again. And for the first time in years, I felt not only pain, but anger. A quiet but persistent anger at the injustice, at the years of neglect, at the way I'd been treated. When I got back to my room, I couldn't sleep for a long time, replaying the events of the day and my life in my head. In the next room, Brandon and Agnes, who had come back from the restaurant, were laughing loudly. They hadn't even called to check on me. Talia hadn't brought the promised dessert. The room clock showed almost midnight when I made my decision. It was time for a change. Vivian would want me to finally stand up for myself. I quietly left the room and headed for the elevator. The lobby was empty, with only Fern, the receptionist, sitting behind the counter, looking at something on her computer. What can I do for you, Mrs. Huffington? She asked, noticing me. There's something I'd like to discuss about our reservation, I said, feeling confident in my voice for the first time all day. It was time to finally be visible. A knock on the door woke me up around 8 in the morning. I slowly got out of bed, trying to ignore the pain in my joints. Sleep was restless, with thoughts of last night keeping me awake. Who's there? I asked without opening the door. It's me, Talia. Dad said to hurry up. We want to have breakfast downstairs in half an hour. I sighed. Of course, no one had asked what I wanted. Talia had already left, and I slowly began to pack. We would go to the funeral tomorrow. Today was a free day. Brendan said something about walking through the historic center of Richmond. In the shower, washing away my tiredness, I thought about the conversation with Fern last night. She'd been so attentive, so involved, I almost cried. Mrs. Huffington, if you need anything, just say the word, she said when I returned to the room, still undecided about drastic measures. Exactly 35 minutes later, I walked down to the hotel restaurant. My family was already sitting at a table, staring at their phones. Finally, Agnes grumbled, not taking her eyes off the screen. We've already ordered. What about me? I asked, sitting down. How do we know what you want? Brandon shrugged. You order it yourself. I nodded and called the waiter over. I ordered scrambled eggs and toast with jam, even though I didn't have much of an appetite. There were families sitting at neighboring tables, grown children listening attentively to their elderly parents, some holding hands, laughing. Ordinary, loving families, something I've never had before. Today we want to go to the mall, Agnes announced as breakfast was brought to us. There's a great outlet mall in Richmond with designer clothes. What about a tour of the historic center? I asked. Brandon rolled his eyes. Mom, who cares about that? Old houses, boring tour guides. No, we're going shopping. You're picking up Myrna from the airport too, Agnes added. Her flight is at noon, and then we'll meet at the outlet. I nodded silently. Once again, everything had been decided without me, as always. Grandma, Talia finally got off the phone. I'm sorry I didn't bring you dessert yesterday. I forgot. It's okay, sweetie, I smiled. I wasn't offended. It was a lie. I was offended, and deeply. But years of hiding my feelings had taken their toll. It was easier to pretend everything was okay. Oh, you should have seen this restaurant, Agnes began to brag. Classy interiors, real candles on the tables. I ordered the duck breast with cherry sauce, divine. And Brandon had the steak, which literally melted in my mouth. I realized that she was deliberately detailing the whole thing to make me feel what I was missing, but I didn't let it show. Yeah, it's a shame you didn't come with us, Brandon said without a trace of regret in his voice. You wouldn't have liked it, though. It's too noisy for you. After breakfast, they packed up quickly and left in a cab, leaving me the keys to our sedan for the airport. I went back to the room to change before checking out. In the hallway, I ran into Fern, who was finishing up her shift. Good morning, Mrs. Huffington, she smiled. How are you today? Not bad, thank you, I replied. I'm on my way to pick up my sister at the airport. And your family? She frowned slightly. They'd already gone shopping. Fern nodded, and something like sympathy flashed in her gaze. It made me uncomfortable that a stranger could see right through my family situation. If you need anything, she repeated her phrase from yesterday, feel free to call me anytime. I'm on till 6 today. The drive to the airport took about half an hour. Myrna, as usual, was late for the meeting. I waited at the gate for almost 40 minutes before she appeared, chattering on the phone and rolling two huge suitcases behind her. Eunice, darling, she kissed me airily on the cheek without interrupting the conversation. Yes, Patty, I'll call you back later. I'm in Richmond for the funeral of an old friend, Eunice. Yeah, the artist. I helped load the suitcases into the car, even though my back protested. God, Eunice, you look terrible, was the first thing Myrna said when we got in the car. Those wrinkles around your eyes. You should try my retinol cream. I'm going to my best friend's funeral, Myrna, I replied tiredly. My appearance isn't the most important thing right now. Nonsense. Appearance is always the most important thing. Vivian would agree with me. She was an artist. She understood the importance of aesthetics. I gritted my teeth. Myrna hardly knew Vivian, had seen her only 5 or 6 times over the years. How dare she say what Vivian would agree with? By the way, did you book me a suite? My sister asked. Yes, just like you asked. Wonderful. Where are the others? At the mall. We'll meet them there. Oh, that's a wonderful idea. Myrna's excited. I've been meaning to update my closet. On the way to the outlet, Myrna chattered on and on about her beauty treatments, her new boyfriend, 20 years younger than her, and the cruise she'd booked for the fall. Not a word about Vivian, not a word of sympathy. When we got to the mall, Brandon texted, We're at the cafe on the second floor. I helped Myrna with her endless bags. It turned out she had a bunch of shopping bags from the airport in addition to her suitcases, and went up to the second floor. Agnes and Talia were sitting at a table surrounded by shopping bags, and Brandon was at the bar ordering drinks. Myrna! Agnes exclaimed with fake enthusiasm. She and Myrna had always adored each other defiantly, even though I knew that behind their backs they were slinging mud at each other. How was your flight? Terrible! Myrna sighed dramatically. Next to me sat a fat man who snored all the way. I almost went crazy. They started discussing the flight, then moved on to shopping, then to the latest Hollywood gossip. I sat in silence, sipping water while they drank cocktails. No one paid any attention to me. Oh, I have to show you this dress. Myrna began rummaging through her countless bags. I bought it at the airport at a 50% discount. I looked at them, at my son, my daughter-in-law, my granddaughter, my sister, and suddenly realized with piercing clarity that they were strangers to me. All these years I had deluded myself into believing that we had a real family, that somewhere deep down they loved me. But it was an illusion. I was just a convenient wallet app for them. We won't have time to hit all the stores before closing time, Agnes said, looking at her watch. I suggest we split up. That's a great idea, Brandon seconded. Mom, you can take Myrna to the hotel so she can drop off her things, and we'll continue shopping. What about you? I asked. We'll call a cab, Brandon said. Or you could come back for us in a couple hours. I nodded and got up from the table. By the way, Brandon added, leave me some cash. I want to buy that shirt we saw at the boutique. I silently pulled out my wallet and counted out $300. Brandon took the money without even thanking me. And I need money for a cab too, in case you don't come back, Agnes added. I gave her another $100. On the way back to the hotel, Myrna talked nonstop about her plans for the evening. I hear there's a spa at the hotel. I want to book a massage and a wrap. My body's all stiff from the flight. Oh, and we should definitely go out to dinner at a nice restaurant. Maybe the one you went to last night? I didn't go with them, I said quietly. What? Why? Myrna was surprised. They said I wouldn't fit in at a restaurant like that I'd ruin the evening with my senile talk. Myrna was silent for a moment, then laughed. Oh, Eunice, they were only joking. You've always been so imaginative. Of course they wanted you to go. They went without me, Myrna. So what? Young people want to have fun without looking up to the older generation. It's only natural. I didn't argue. Myrna has always justified everything Brandon did, even the most selfish. At the hotel, Fern was still on shift. She helped check Myrna in and called the porter for her luggage. How was your trip to the airport, Mrs. Huffington? Fern asked as Myrna went upstairs with the porter. It was fine, I replied. You're very attentive. That's my job, she smiled. I noticed you were upset last night. I was embarrassed. Was it really that obvious? Everyone has bad days, I mumbled. Of course, Fern nodded. I just want you to know that sometimes it helps to talk to someone neutral, someone who doesn't know the whole backstory. At that moment, Myrna came back down to the lobby. Eunice, you have no idea what a lovely suite you've booked. It's got a king-sized bed. She turned to Fern. Young lady, where's the spa? I'd like to make an appointment for a massage. On the third floor, ma'am, Fern replied. But I'm afraid we're booked up for the day. What? No way! Myrna was indignant. I flew from afar and very tired. Surely we can think of something. I'm sorry, Fern said firmly. Hotel rules do not allow us to cancel other people's reservations. Myrna snorted unhappily. What a terrible service. Eunice, why did you choose this hotel? They don't know how to treat customers here. I remained silent again, though I kept saying, You asked me to book the Jefferson. I have to go back for the others, I said instead. Are you coming with me, or are you staying? Of course I'm staying, Myrna exclaimed. I'm off the road, I need to rest. Tell them I expect everyone for dinner at 8 in the hotel restaurant. I nodded and headed for the exit. Fern quietly called out to me, Mrs. Huffington, if you need any help with anything, I'm here until 6. Her eyes were full of sincere concern, and somehow it struck a chord with me. A complete stranger was showing more concern than my own family. I followed Brandon and the others back to the mall. They were already waiting at the entrance, surrounded by their new purchases. How much longer? Brandon said irritably when I pulled up. We've been here for half an hour. Sorry, there was a traffic jam, I lied. But really I was just sitting in the car in the hotel parking lot, trying to pull myself together. All the way back, Agnes and Talia talked about their shopping, and Brandon stared silently at his phone. I drove, feeling like a cab driver for strangers. At the hotel, they scattered to their rooms, tossing me, Let's change and come down for dinner. Myrna was already waiting in the restaurant, fresh from her bath. Where are the others? She asked. Getting changed. Why haven't you changed? You're still wearing the same dull blouse. I didn't bring much with me, Myrna. We're here for a funeral, not a fashion show. That's why you look 70 when you're only 67, my sister said. You have to look after yourself in every situation. I stayed silent, swallowing my resentment. Brandon, Agnes, and Talia came down half an hour later, all in new clothes. Dinner went on as usual. They discussed their topics and I sat in silence, occasionally interrupted by a word. And tomorrow after the funeral, Agnes said, we could go to the winery. There's a great place not far away where they make a divine rosé. A winery? I asked. After the funeral? What's the big deal? Agnes shrugged. Vivian loved life, didn't she? She wouldn't have wanted us to sit around and be sad. But you didn't even know her, I objected. Mom, don't be so dramatic, Brandon interjected. We came to support you, but that doesn't mean we have to turn the trip into a morning marathon. Support me? I wanted to shout. You didn't even ask me how I was feeling after the news of my best friend's death. But I remained silent again. After dinner, everyone went to their rooms. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to Brandon and his family in the suite next door, watching some kind of comedy. Their laughter could be heard through the wall. The clock was almost midnight when I made my decision. Quietly leaving the room, I walked down to the lobby. Behind the counter was the night manager, not Fern, but a young man with an Elliot name tag. What can I do for you, ma'am? he asked. I'd like to change our reservation, I said firmly. My name is Eunice Huffington. Elliot opened the reservation information on the computer. What exactly do you want to change, Mrs. Huffington? I took a deep breath. Vivian's voice echoed in my head. It's time to live for yourself, Eunice. My hands trembled slightly, but the decision had already been made. I want to cancel 2 rooms a suite for 3 in Brandon Huffington's name and a suite in Myrna Pitt's name, effective tomorrow. Elliot raised his eyebrows in surprise but said nothing. His fingers raced across the keyboard. Are you sure, Mrs. Huffington? Canceling at the last minute means the money won't be refunded. I know, I nodded. I'm not asking for a refund. I just want them to move out tomorrow morning. Okay. Elliot made a few clicks. Done. The rooms are canceled starting tomorrow noon. Your own room stays as it was, for 2 more nights. Thank you. I thanked him and headed for the elevator. My heart was pounding in my chest, but along with the anxiety I felt something else, a strange, long-forgotten sense of freedom. For the first time in years, I was doing something just for me. When I got back to my room, I went to bed and fell asleep almost immediately. A peaceful, deep sleep that I hadn't had in a long time. I woke up before dawn. Outside the window was gray, silent, as if the world itself had frozen in anticipation of change. A strange sense of lightness filled me, even though it was the day I was going to say goodbye to Vivian. Staring at the ceiling, I thought back to our last conversation. It was a month before she died. Vivian's voice was weak, but she still had the strength of spirit I'd always admired. How are you doing, sweetheart? She asked then. Is Brandon still sitting on your neck? I tried to make my usual joke. He's my son, Viv. It's okay for me to help him. Helping him is one thing, she countered. Being a cash cow is another. You're 67 years old, Eunice. How much longer are you going to live their life instead of your own? I sighed. Vivian was the only person I could tell the truth about my family to. I'm afraid that if I stop giving them money, they'll stop talking to me altogether. And what? Vivian's voice became sharper. They don't even talk to you now. Using, yes. Communicating, no. I'm lying here dying. And you know what my biggest regret is? That I didn't say no to some people a lot sooner. Don't waste your last years on people who don't appreciate you, Uni. I didn't say anything at the time, but her words were deeply embedded in my soul. And now, lying in my hotel room on the day of her funeral, I realized that I had finally found the courage to take her advice. Slowly, I got out of bed and pulled a black dress out of my suitcase, simple but elegant. Vivian had always said that I liked it classic. After taking a shower and styling my hair, I looked much better than I had yesterday. It was as if the decision I'd made the night before had rejuvenated me. The clock read 6:30. The funeral was scheduled for 10 in the morning, but I decided to drive to the church early. Gathering my purse and taking my car keys, I quietly left the room. The hallway was empty. My family was probably still asleep after last night's dinner. In the lobby, Fern was already behind the counter. When she saw me, she smiled. Good morning, Mrs. Huffington. You're early today. Yes, I nodded. I'm on my way to a funeral. I'm sorry for your loss, she said sincerely. Will your family be traveling with you? I hesitated. No, they will join us later. Fern nodded understandingly, not asking any more questions. But I noticed something in her eyes, as if she knew about my decision of the night. I'll leave the room key, I added. I'll be back after the service. Of course, Fern accepted the key. And Mrs. Huffington, whatever happens, remember, sometimes we need to take care of ourselves before we can take care of others. I smiled weakly, surprised by her insight, and walked out of the hotel. The morning air was fresh and pleasant. I got in my car and headed toward St. Paul's Episcopal Church where a memorial service was to be held. On the way, I thought about Vivian, about our friendship of 50 years. We'd met freshman year of college. I was a quiet, inconspicuous girl from a conservative family. Vivian was a bright, bold rebel with an amazing artistic talent. You're too good for this world, Uni, she often said. You need to learn to be selfish once in a while. But I didn't. First, I took care of my parents, then I married Harold, had Brandon, buried my husband, and once again I was a pillar of support for everyone. Even when Brandon grew up and married Agnes, I continued to live their lives, pushing my own desires to the back burner. The church was still closed when I arrived. I sat on a bench in the small park across the street, watching the city wake up. Taking out my phone, I muted the sound. I knew the calls from my family would start soon, but I wasn't ready for that conversation. Not now, when I had to say goodbye to Vivian. Around 8, the first cars started pulling up to the church. An elderly man in an austere suit, apparently the funeral planner, opened the doors. I approached slowly. "Are you here for the service for Vivian Prescott?" he asked. "Yes, I'm Eunice Huffington." We were close friends. "Ah, Miss Huffington." His face brightened. "Miss Prescott has told me a great deal about you. Come in, you're one of the first." I entered the cool, quiet church. At the altar was a portrait of Vivian, smiling, brush in hand, just as I remembered her in her best years. Gradually, the church filled with people. Many I knew, old friends of Vivian's, artists, gallery owners. Some came up to me, hugged me, said warm words. I was surprised at how many people knew of our friendship. "Eunice, dear." An older woman with a short haircut came over and hugged me tightly. "I'm Margaret, remember? We met at the opening of Viv's last exhibition." I nodded, remembering this woman, an art historian, a close friend of Vivian's. "Vivian loved you so much," Margaret continued. "Always said you were the most loyal person in her life." It took my breath away. "Did she?" "Of course." Margaret was surprised. "She was always telling me how strong you were, despite everything you'd been through. Only lately she's been worried about you." "Worried?" "Yes, she said you were letting your family do too much." Margaret faltered. "I'm sorry. Maybe I shouldn't have said that." "It's all right," I said softly. Vivian had always been straightforward. It was one of the things I loved about her. We made our way to the front row seats, the ones reserved for those closest to us. I was touched that the organizers had included me in that circle. The service was simple and moving. The priest spoke of a life full of creativity and love. Friends shared memories. I sat listening to their stories and realized that despite the pain of loss, I was lucky to have such a friend. At one point, I felt the vibration of a cell phone in my purse, then another and another. I knew it was my family discovering that they were being evicted from their rooms. In my mind, I pictured the scene. Brandon indignantly demanding an explanation from the receptionist, Agnes rolling her eyes dramatically, Myrna promising to make a scene. But for the first time in many years, it didn't alarm me. After the service, there was a small reception in a neighboring hall. People gathered in small groups, remembering Vivian, sharing stories. I was standing against the wall with a glass of water when a tall, gray-haired man approached me. "Are you Eunice?" he asked me. "I'm Noel, Vivian's ex-husband." I nodded. Vivian and Noel had been married briefly in the 70s, but had maintained a warm relationship. I'd met him a few times, though the last time was many years ago. "She talked about you a lot," he continued, "especially in the last few months. Worried." "Everyone says she was worried about me." I smiled weakly. "I should have been worried about her, though." "That's the kind of person she was," Noel smiled. "Even when she was dying, she thought of others." We talked for a moment. Then he added, "You know, she left something for you. Asked me to give it to her after everything. It's in the gallery. Maybe you could stop by there in the next few days?" "Sure," I replied. I planned to visit the gallery anyway. A noise at the entrance caught my attention. I turned around and was surprised to see Talia, my granddaughter. She looked confused, looking around. "Excuse me," I said to Noel and walked toward Talia. "Grandma," she exclaimed when she saw me. "Finally! I've been looking everywhere for you." "What's wrong?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "What happened?" Talia looked at me in disbelief. "We're being kicked out of the hotel. The receptionist said you canceled the reservation." I nodded. "Yes, I did." "But why? Dad's furious. He and Mom have been trying to call you for 2 hours." I muted my phone. I said calmly, "I'm at my best friend's funeral, Talia." "Is that why you left us homeless?" "You have money for another hotel," I said, surprised at my own calmness. "Or you can go home. It's only a 3-hour drive." Talia looked shocked. Grandma, what's wrong with you? You've never done this before. That's right, I agreed. Never. And do you know why I did it now? Talia shook her head in confusion. At that moment, I remembered one of our conversations with Vivian. It was about 10 years ago, when Brandon had once again borrowed a large sum of money from me for a business project, which of course had failed. Uni, Vivian said then. They'll never change until you change. They're used to you always being there for them, always helping, always forgiving. Why should they change? He's my son, I argued. I can't just turn my back on him. I'm not talking about turning away, Vivian explained patiently. I'm talking about boundaries, about self-respect, about teaching them to respect you. I didn't listen then. But now, standing in front of my confused granddaughter, I realized that Vivian was right. I did it because I was tired of being invisible in my own family, I answered Talia calmly. Tired of being an ATM, tired of being used and disrespected. We respect you, Talia exclaimed. No, sweetheart, I shook my head. You don't even know me. The phone in my bag vibrated again. I pulled it out. Brendan was calling for the 20th time. I hit the reject button. Tell my dad and Grandma Myrna I'll be back at the hotel after the wake, I said. If they want to talk to me, have them wait there. They won't wait, Talia shook her head. Dad said we're going home tonight. He's very angry, Grandma. I understand, I nodded. It's his choice. Talia looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. You've changed. What happened to you? I just remembered who I am, I answered softly, and turned to go back to the other guests. Grandma, Talia called out to me. What about me? What am I supposed to do? I turned around. You're a grown woman, Talia. You decide for yourself. You can leave with your parents. You can stay and come with me to dinner with Vivian's friends. It's your choice. With these words, I returned to the hall, where Margaret was already looking for me. Eunice, we are going to have a small group at Viv's favorite restaurant. Will you join us? I'd love to, I smiled. We walked out of the church. I turned around to see if Talia had left, but I was surprised to see her standing uncertainly at the entrance. Our gazes met, and I gestured for her to join me. After a second's hesitation, she headed toward us. This is my granddaughter, Talia, I introduced her to Margaret. Talia, this is Margaret, a close friend of Vivian's. Nice to meet you, Talia said politely, and I was surprised to see the genuine interest in her eyes. We got into Margaret's car and drove to the restaurant. I felt strangely calm. For the first time in years, I had made a choice for myself, and even though there were bound to be difficult conversations ahead, I knew I had done the right thing. There were about 10 people in the restaurant, Vivian's closest friends. They accepted me as their own, asking me about our friendship, sharing stories. I told them how Vivian and I had once gone on a spontaneous trip to New York when we were in our early 20s, how we had snuck into a private gallery show posing as important critics. It was Vivian's idea, of course, I laughed. I'd always been too correct, but she had a way of bringing me out of my shell. She always said you were her anchor, said an older woman who introduced herself as Doris. That without your support, she would never have decided to open her own gallery. I was touched. All these years, I had felt like I was the only one who needed Vivian, her strength and support. To know that our friendship meant just as much to her was important. Talia sat next to me, silent but attentive. I watched as she listened to stories about Vivian, about the art world, about a friendship that had lasted half a century. At one point, she said quietly to me, I didn't know you had such an interesting life, Grandma. I've had a lot of things in my life, Talia, I replied. It's just that no one ever asked. After lunch, Noel offered to drive us to the hotel. Are you sure you want to go back there? He asked. Maybe we should go to my place. I have a big house, there's plenty of room. Thanks, but I have to finish what I started, I said. As we pulled up to the Jefferson, I saw our family sedan in the parking lot, so Brandon and the others hadn't left yet. Are you sure you can handle it? Noel asked, looking at me with concern. Absolutely, I nodded. Vivian had taught me a lot, and it was time to put those lessons into practice. We got out of the car and headed toward the entrance. I didn't know what was waiting for me inside, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. Talia and I entered the hotel. The lobby greeted us with coolness and quiet music, contrasting with the tension hanging in the air. At the receptionist's desk, Fern was talking on the phone, but when she saw us, she quickly ended the conversation and gave a friendly nod. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Huffington. How was the ceremony?" "Dignified and touching," I replied. "Thank you for asking." "Your family is waiting for you in the hotel restaurant," Fern said, giving me a concerned look. "They were quite insistent about your return." "I'm sure they have," I smiled weakly. "Do you know if my sister is there too?" "Yes, all three of them," she confirmed. I took a deep breath and turned to my granddaughter. "Talia, you don't have to come with me. You can wait here." She shifted nervously from foot to foot but shook her head. "No, Grandma, I'll go with you. I think, whatever happens, you're going to need support." That small gesture of concern touched me. Perhaps not all was lost with Talia. I squeezed her hand gratefully, and we headed toward the restaurant. Brandon, Agnes, and Myrna were sitting at a table in the far corner. Their suitcases were next to each other. They'd obviously already checked out. Brandon's face was red with anger. Agnes had her lips pressed together in her usual expression of displeasure, and Myrna was tapping her manicured fingers nervously on the table. They spotted us when we were halfway to the table. Brandon straightened up sharply, ready to attack. "Finally," he exclaimed, not caring that other customers were looking back at us. "Mom, are you out of your mind? Why the hell did you cancel our reservation?" I calmly sat down at the table, gesturing for Talia to do the same. "Hello, Brandon," I said in an even voice. "Yes, I canceled your reservation. It's my decision." "Your decision?" Agnes intervened with a venomous chuckle. "What about our opinion? We came here to support you in your time of need, and you just put us out on the street." "Support me?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Support you how? By leaving me alone in the lobby while you dined at a fancy restaurant? Or by not even bothering to ask how I was feeling about my best friend's death?" "Oh, here we go." Agnes rolled her eyes. "Always complaining. We can't read your mind, Eunice." "We don't have to," I answered in the same calm voice, surprised at my own composure. "It would have been enough to treat me like a human being, not an ATM." "What nonsense!" Myrna intervened. "Eunice, you're acting like a capricious child. I had to cancel my massage because of your antics." "Massage," I repeated. "Of course, that's the biggest problem right now. Not the fact that I was saying goodbye to someone who was closer to me than my own sister, but your failed massage." Myrna opened her mouth but couldn't come up with an answer. Apparently, my unaccustomed directness caught her off guard. "Mom," Brandon tried to pull himself together, lowering his voice. "I don't see what the problem is. If you weren't happy with something, you should have said so. Why the spectacle?" "I told you, Brendan," I replied quietly. "Many times. But you never listened." "What exactly is your problem?" He crossed his arms over his chest, taking a defensive stance. I took a deep breath. It was now or never. All the pain, all the frustration built up over decades was ready to come out. "I'm not satisfied that I only exist for you when you need money. I don't like that you treat me with disdain, ridicule my opinions, ignore my desires." My voice remained quiet but firm. "I'm not satisfied that you don't respect me, that you don't appreciate my sacrifices, that you don't see me as a human being." "What a dramatic speech," Agnes snorted. "You're the one who always offers to help, and now you're making us look like monsters." "Yes, I did offer," I agreed, "because I thought that if I was useful, I would earn your love. But now I realize that's not how it works. Love can't be bought. So you're accusing us of not loving you? Really, Mom? After everything I've done for you?" "What have you done for me, Brandon?" I asked. "Name one thing." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, and there was no answer. "I was there for you when you were sick with childhood illnesses," I continued. "I worked 2 jobs to pay for your college. I helped with the down payment on your house. I gave you money for every failed business project. I paid for your wedding, Talia's birth, vacations, renovations. And now you're footing the bill?" Agnes said dismissively. "No," I shook my head. "I just want you to understand that I did it all out of love, and all I get in return are demands for more. That's not fair, Brandon shouted. If you didn't want to give money, you could have just said no. And how would you have reacted? I smiled sadly. Would you have stopped talking to me? Oh, yes. You don't talk to me unless you need the money. At that moment, a waiter came to our table. Excuse me, I don't want to disturb you, but the other guests are complaining about the noise. We were just leaving, Agnes said sharply, standing up. Brandon, take the suitcases. No, I shook my head. If anyone has to leave, it's the three of you. I'm staying at the hotel. I have a room booked for 2 nights. Oh, you, Myrna started to say, but Brandon stopped her with a gesture. All right, he gritted his teeth. We'll go. But this conversation isn't over, Mom. I'm afraid it is, I countered. I'm done. What about our plans? Agnes suddenly blurted out. We were going to talk to you about the house. My house? I raised my eyebrow questioningly. Yes, about your bloody house. Agnes couldn't take it anymore. It's too big for you alone. We were going to suggest that you move into a nursing home, and the proceeds from the sale. Agnes! Brandon shouted at her, but it was too late. Nursing home, I repeated slowly, feeling a wave of anger rising inside me. So that was the plan. Send me to a nursing home and take the money from the sale of the house I'd lived in for 40 years? The house I paid off single-handedly after your father died? Brandon looked confused. Mom, that's not true. We just wanted you to be taken care of by professionals. At your age. At my age? I almost laughed. Brandon, I'm 67, not 97. I'm fully functional. I have no health problems. The only problem I have is you. How dare you? Myrna exploded. After all we've done for you. And what have you done for me, Myrna? I turned to my sister. You come once a year, bring unnecessary gifts, and criticize my lifestyle. You didn't even call me when you heard about Vivian's death, even though you knew how much she meant to me. Myrna blushed and looked away. So you're just cutting us out of your life? Brandon asked bitterly. No, I answered softly. I just won't live for you anymore. If you want to be a part of my life, be my guest, but on different terms, with respect, with sincerity, without manipulation. How naive, Agnes said dismissively. You think you can dictate terms? You have no one but us. You're wrong, I shook my head. I have myself, and now I know that's enough. Talia, who had been silent all this time, suddenly looked up. Mom, Dad, Grandma's right. Brandon and Agnes stared at their daughter in amazement. What are you talking about? Agnes hissed. What I should have said a long time ago, Talia answered firmly. You treat grandmother terribly, always have been. I just took it for granted because I always have. I looked at my granddaughter in surprise. Did she see everything? Did she understand? Talia, you don't understand adult relationships, Brandon said with fake condescension. This is a family matter. Exactly, Talia exclaimed. Family. And family is supposed to support each other, not take advantage of each other. Are you taking her side? Agnes's eyes narrowed. After all we've done for you? What have you done for me? Talia asked, echoing my recent question. All my life you've taught me that money is all that matters, that Grandma only exists to give us that money. That sentimentality is a weakness. Agnes looked like she'd been hit. It's not true. She was indignant. We taught you to be practical. No. Talia shook her head. You taught me to be selfish. But today I saw a different life. I listened to Vivian's friends, listened to their stories of friendship, of support, of the importance of valuing people. And I realized that I had never seen anything like this in our family. There was silence in the restaurant. The other diners had long since stopped pretending not to listen to our squabble. Some were watching us openly. Others avoided looking in our direction. Pack up, Brandon said coldly, rising. We're leaving. I'm not going with you, Talia said firmly. I'm staying with grandmother. What? Agnes stared at her daughter. Don't be silly. You have a shift at the cafe tomorrow? I'll call and ask for a substitute, Talia shrugged. It's only for a couple of days. If you don't come with us now, Agnes began threateningly, you may not come home at all. Agnes! Brandon shouted at her, but it was too late. Talia turned pale, but raised her chin resolutely. All right, she said quietly. Then I won't come back. Don't be so dramatic. Agnes rolled her eyes. Where will you go? You don't have any money. I do, I intervened. And Talia can live with me as long as she wants. Great, Agnes exclaimed. Now you're getting our daughter on your side. How low you have fallen, Eunice. I'm not luring anyone, I replied calmly. Talia is a grown woman and makes her own decisions. We're leaving, Brandon said, grabbing the suitcases. Come on, Agnes, Myrna. Myrna, unusually silent after my words, got up and followed them. At the restaurant's exit, Brandon turned around. This isn't over, Mom. You'll regret your decision. The only thing I regret, I replied, is not doing it sooner. They left. Talia and I remained seated at the table, surrounded by an awkward silence. Gradually, the buzz of conversation in the restaurant resumed, and people went back to their business. Are you sure? I asked my granddaughter. Your mother was very angry. Talia smiled weakly. She always gets angry. That's the way Agnes Huffington is. You have more to lose than you realize, I warned. Don't make decisions based on emotion. Grandmother, Talia took my hand. I've watched them treat you my whole life, and I took it for granted because I didn't know it was different. She was quiet for a moment. But today, listening to the stories about you and Vivian, I realized that friendships can be deeper than Mom and her so-called friends. That relationships can be built on something more than gain. I squeezed her hand. And you're willing to sacrifice your relationship with your parents for this epiphany? I'm not sacrificing. Talia shook her head. I just don't want to be part of a toxic relationship anymore. If they love me, they'll accept my new boundaries. And if they don't, then we never had a real family. I looked at my granddaughter with wonder and pride. When did she have time to become so wise? Or was this wisdom always in her, just waiting for the right time? What do we do next? Talia asked with a slight uncertainty. We'll order lunch for starters, I smiled. I was hungry. And then? I wondered. I had an appointment with Noel, Vivian's ex-husband. She left something for me in her gallery. Can I come with you? Talia asked hesitantly. I've never been to a real art gallery. Sure, I nodded. I think Vivian would like that. We ordered lunch and ate quietly, really talking to each other for the first time in a long time. Talia talked about college, about her dreams of becoming a photographer, a dream her parents didn't support, considering it a hobby, not a profession. I shared stories about my youth, about traveling with Vivian, about how I once had a passion for photography myself, but gave it up when I got married. It's never too late to go back to what you love, Talia said. You know, I looked at her thoughtfully. You're right. It's never too late. After lunch, we went up to my room. Talia was going to go back to the lobby and ask the receptionist for a private room, but I suggested she stay with me. The standard room had a double bed, enough room for two. While Talia showered, I sat by the window looking out at the street. Downstairs, I saw our family sedan pulling out of the hotel parking lot. Brandon driving, Agnes next to him, Myrna in the back. They were driving away, and for the first time in years, I felt neither fear nor guilt. Just a quiet certainty that I'd done the right thing. It wasn't just a fight, it was a long-awaited release. I finally expressed everything that had built up over decades, all the resentment, all the frustration, all the pain. And the amazing thing is, I survived. The world didn't collapse, the earth didn't open up. On the contrary, I felt lighter, as if a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Of course, there's still a lot of challenges ahead. Brandon's not one to back down easily, especially when it comes to money. Agnes will hold a grudge for a long time. Myrna will gossip about me to everyone she knows. But now, at this minute, it all seemed so insignificant. Talia came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a hotel robe, a towel over her wet hair. Grandma, she said, taking a seat next to me by the window, I want to apologize. For what, dear? For all those years when I was an accessory, when I laughed at their jokes about you, when I accepted your money without thinking what it was worth to you. I put my arm around her shoulders. You were a child, Talia. Children take family norms for granted. The important thing is that you see the situation clearly now. She nodded. Do you know what the strangest thing is? I feel freer. Like I've been trapped all this time too, I just didn't realize it. I smiled, recognizing my own thoughts in her words. Yes, that's exactly right. We were both trapped. And now we're both free. We were sitting by the window watching the setting sun color Richmond in golden hues. For the first time in years, I felt a real connection to a member of my family. Not begrudged, not bought, but genuine. At that moment, the phone rang. I glanced at the screen, an unfamiliar number. Hello? I answered. Mrs. Huffington? It's Noel Prescott. I just wanted to see if you could come to the gallery tomorrow. There's something important Vivian wanted to tell you. Yes, of course, I replied. My granddaughter and I will definitely be there. Good, he said with a smile. I think Vivian would be glad you two are coming together. I hung up the phone and turned to Talia. We're going to Vivian's gallery tomorrow. You haven't changed your mind? No, she shook her head firmly. I wouldn't miss it for the world. I looked at my granddaughter and thought about how strange life is. Sometimes you have to lose something to gain something more valuable. I lost the illusion of family, but gained a real connection with Talia. Lost Vivian, but her wisdom and strength now lived within me. Perhaps this was just the beginning of a new chapter in which I would finally live for myself. The sun softly illuminated my small living room. I sat in a chair by the window, watching the leaves on the trees slowly change color from green to golden. Richmond is especially beautiful in the fall. It's one of the reasons I chose this city for a new beginning. It's been exactly 3 months since the day I canceled my family's reservation at the Jefferson Hotel. 3 months since Vivian's funeral. 3 months of my new life. The apartment I now lived in was much smaller than my former home, but much cozier. 2 bedrooms, a bright living room with high ceilings, a small kitchen, and most importantly, a spacious balcony where I'd planted a real container garden. Rosemary, basil, mint, small rose bushes, and even a miniature lemon, my little green kingdom. The most surprising thing was not the move itself, but how easily I decided to do it. When Talia and I returned to the hotel after our visit to the Vivian Gallery, I already knew I wasn't going back to my old home for good. There was a surprise waiting for us at the gallery. Noel handed me an envelope from Vivian, and in it were the keys to this apartment and a short letter. Junie, I bought this apartment a year ago when I found out about my diagnosis. I wanted to move to Richmond to spend my last months close to the gallery and friends. Didn't work out. She's yours now. Use it however you want. Live in it, rent it out, sell it. But you know what? I think you're gonna love it here. No ghosts of the past, just a chance to start over. It's time to live for yourself, remember? Forever yours, Viv. Vivian, even as she was leaving, found a way to take care of me. At first, I wanted to just sell the apartment. The thought of such a drastic change was frightening. But Talia convinced me to at least look at it. The apartment turned out to be in an old brick building 2 blocks from the Vivian Gallery, in Richmond's historic district. It had high ceilings, wood floors, and huge windows that let in the sunlight. The balcony overlooked a small park, and within a few blocks lived Margaret Doris and other friends of Vivian's whom I'd met at the funeral. Grandma, this is perfect, Talia said then, looking around. It's like Vivian knew this is what you needed. I hesitated for a few more days. Leaving the city where I'd lived my whole life seemed crazy, leaving a house full of memories. But then I realized it was those memories that held me captive. A home where I took care of everyone but myself. A town where every corner reminded me of the sacrifices made for a family that never appreciated them. When we got home, Brandon was already waiting. He came without Agnes, which was unusual. She was always involved in all the important conversations. Mom, we need to talk, he said, standing on the doorstep. There was no aggression in his voice, but rather fatigue and something akin to humility. I let him in, offered him tea. We sat in the kitchen like old times when he'd come in after school and I'd make him cookies. I've been thinking about what you said, Brendan began, staring into his cup. Maybe you're right about something. I waited silently for the rest of it. Agnes and I talked all the way home. She's still angry, but he stammered. I realized that we really took you for granted, taking advantage of your kindness. Thank you for recognizing that. I said quietly. But that doesn't mean you have to cut things off so abruptly, he added quickly. We're still a family. We can change, I wondered. Could a person at 46 really change? Could the habit of using a mother, formed over decades, disappear? I wasn't sure. What about Talia? I asked instead of answering. Brandon's face darkened. Agnes is very upset by her antics, but I'll talk to her. We'll sort it out. Did you ask how Talia feels? He blinked confusedly. She's a child, Mom. She's just confused. She's 23, Brandon. She's a grown woman who is entitled to her own feelings and decisions. He shook his head. You're turning her against us. No, I said firmly. She was just seeing a different relationship model for the first time, and she made a choice. We talked for another hour or so. Brandon tried to talk me into forgetting the incident and getting back to normal, but I had already made up my mind. I will maintain a relationship with my son, but on my own terms. With respect, with boundaries, without manipulation. I'm moving to Richmond, I informed him at the end of the conversation. Vivian had left me the apartment. Brandon stared at me in amazement. Are you kidding? Leaving your home? Your whole life here? Not giving up, but starting a new one, I corrected him. I'm thinking of putting the house on the market next month. He immediately tensed up. And what are you going to do with the money? That's it, I thought. It's always about the money. It's not your concern, Brandon. But Mom, no, I shook my head. I'll decide what I want to do with my money. And it's not up for discussion. After Brandon left, I called the realtor. 2 weeks later, the house was sold to a young family with 3 children. I packed only personal belongings, photographs, and a few pieces of furniture I was particularly attached to. Everything else I either sold or gave to charity. Talia helped me with the move. She still hadn't gotten back to her parents, although she had spoken to them on the phone several times. Agnes was adamant. Either Talia, apologize and stop this rebellion, or don't come back. Brandon was softer, but didn't understand his daughter's decision either. What are you going to do next? I asked Talia as we unpacked boxes in my new apartment. I'm going to stay with a friend, she said. I'll work more at the cafe. Also, I applied to art school, a photography course. I hugged her. Vivian would be proud of you. She smiled. You know, I often wonder what my life would have been like if I had gotten to know you and Vivian earlier. If I'd grown up with different values. It's never too late to change, I said. Look at me, at 67, starting over. Now 3 months later, I sat at the window in my Richmond apartment and thought about how my life had changed. The sale of the house had brought in a substantial sum of money enough to allow me to live comfortably and not worry about the future. I put some of the money into an account for Talia, for tuition and future housing. The other part went into investments that would bring a steady income. Brandon called twice in those 3 months. The first time was a week after I moved in, asking if I had come to my senses. The second was a month ago, when he and Agnes needed money to fix the roof. I politely declined. He never called again. Myrna called a couple of times too. First, she resented my crazy act. Then, when she heard about the sale of the house, she tried to find out how much I'd gotten and whether I was going to share it with my sister. When I answered in the negative, she took offense and claimed I had always been selfish. That's funny, considering that she was the selfish one in our family all her life. But Talia and I talked regularly. She came to visit me on weekends, showed me her photo works, told me about her studies. Our relationship became deeper, more sincere, although it remained cautious. There were too many unspoken things between us all these years. Unlike before, I was now busy with my own interests. I joined a swimming group for the elderly at the local pool. Vivian had always said that water made you forget your age, and she was right. 3 times a week I swam for an hour, feeling my muscles strengthen and the tension go away. I also joined a gardening club where I learned how to grow herbs and flowers in containers. My collection grew so large that my balcony became a veritable hanging garden. Neighbors often came by to admire and take a few sprigs of fresh herbs. But the most important change happened inside me. I stopped feeling guilty. I stopped thinking I owed everyone around me. I stopped being afraid of being alone. and I discovered that loneliness is not an emptiness, but a space that can be filled with anything. I filled it with friends. Margaret, Doris, and Vivian's other friends took me into their circle. We went to exhibitions together, to the theater, to dinners. These women, like Vivian, had lived vibrant, full lives and now generously shared their experience and wisdom with me. One day, Margaret asked me, "Don't you regret your decision, Eunice? It was your family after all." I wondered, did I regret it? Did I miss Brandon, his rare smiles, Agnes's attentive gaze when she needed something, Myrna's condescending advice? You know, I finally answered, it's not them I miss. It's the idea of family, the way it was supposed to be. But that idea was always an illusion. The reality was very different. Margaret nodded understandingly. Vivian said you'd realize it one day. She was worried it would be too late. It's never too late to free yourself from a toxic relationship, I said, surprised at my confidence. Even at 67. One warm October day, I sat in Vivian's gallery, now run by Noel, and watched the visitors. An elderly couple were looking at brightly colored abstractions from Vivian's late period. A young woman was sketching while sitting in front of one of the paintings. Quiet conversations, the rustle of footsteps, the squeak of pencil on paper, the special atmosphere of a place where art lives its life. I often came here to be close to a piece of Vivian's soul, sometimes just sitting in the corner with a book. Sometimes I'd help with the little things Noel was happy to do. There was one particular painting in the gallery, a portrait of two young women laughing in an abstract landscape. Vivian and I, painted by her in the 80s. I could stare at those two young, hopeful faces for hours, remembering who we were, what we dreamed of. I thought about the fact that Vivian had managed to live life by her own rules. She never compromised when it came to her happiness and freedom. She loved with sincerity, worked with enthusiasm, made friends with devotion. She left a mark, in art, in people's hearts, in me. And what will I leave behind? It's a question I've never asked before, always thinking only of what I can give to others right now. But now I've begun to reflect on my legacy. Not about money or things, but about who I was, what I brought to this world. Vivian had left me more than just an apartment. She left me an example of how to live my life. She showed me that even at the end of the road, you can think of others without sacrificing yourself. You can love without losing yourself. One can be kind but have boundaries. The gallery door opened, letting in new visitors. I turned around and saw Talia, radiant with joy. "Grandma!" She ran up and hugged me. "I just found out my picture has been chosen for the Young Photographers exhibition. You'll be the first person I show it to." I hugged her back. Maybe this is my real legacy. Not a house, not money, but this young woman who, thanks to me, realized she had the right to live her life. Who might be the one to break the chain of toxic relationships that stretched across generations of our family. In the evening, I sat on the balcony among my plants, watching the sunset color the sky over Richmond with pinks and golds. From the open door came the sound of jazz, another new passion Margaret had instilled in me. I discovered so many new things in the last few months that sometimes it felt as if I hadn't lived 67 years, but was just beginning to live. I no longer worried about what people would say. I didn't worry about Brandon or Myrna judging my decisions. I didn't think about whether I was doing enough for others. I just lived, calmly, confidently, with dignity. You'd be proud of me, Viv, I thought, looking up at the sunset sky. I finally started living for myself. And somewhere deep inside, I felt that she knew, that she always knew I would find that strength within me. That even as she walked away, she left me with the opportunity to start anew. A new chapter in the book of my life in which I was finally the protagonist.